Hey guys, I um, I wanted to get on today and not really feeling the juices flowing particularly on this lazy Sunday, but regardless, I wanted to get on and make a couple of points, um, particularly about. So I was having a conversation with a friend in the past about gender fluidity and Ben Shapiro's kind of take on pronouns and pronoun mandates essentially. And Oh, yeah. So pronoun mandates and all of that, the Jordan Peterson's, controversy with regard to, mandated use of preferred pronouns. Um, and I wanted to talk about that topic, and more deeply, I'm not concerned so much with pronoun mandates or anything like that. I'm more concerned with a proof that I have for gender fluidity, which is this: gender and sex are different things. There's a distinction between sex and gender, right? Gender is mostly socially constructed, sex is biologically constructed. Gender, socially determined, sex, biologically determined. Sex, as far as we understand, very, very difficult to change, right? Biological sex, chromosomally. Gender, very easy to change. The proof for gender fluidity lies in the fact that if I take the right dose of estrogen and a testosterone blocker, my phenotype will be altered. Hence, gender characteristics that are physical will change. Hence, the fact that I can take a testosterone blocker and it will change my gender characteristics is an indicator that gender is fluid. Now, that's all that I'm saying, right? So that's a proof that gender is fluid. But that's only gender fluidity. It is not sex fluidity. And maybe at one point in the future, when technology develops to a certain extent, we'll be able to, maybe sex will be fluid in some way, or maybe we could determine the gender of a fetus or whatever it is at early developmental stages and then produce a particular gender, right? I mean, in Brave New World, they kind of do that with the factory production of you know, uh, the idea of a factory style kind of mechanized reproduction system that doesn't rely on sex, rather on technologically manufactured reproduction rather than sexual romantic reproduction. So, regardless, pronoun mandates are another issue. I really don't want to get into that. All I wanted to say is that that's the proof that I would offer for gender fluidity actually being a thing, which is that if I take a testosterone blocker, physical characteristics will change. My gender appearance, right, will change. Hence, gender is fluid by virtue of the fact that hormones are fluid, right? So there's a certain level of hormonal fluidity, which proves that gender is fluid. And if we can alter those hormones in particular ways, we can most certainly change gender characteristics and produce different phenotypes. Now, whether sex, so it's I'm basically just making the distinction between gender fluidity and sex fluidity, right? So you definitely have gender fluidity. That's inarguable. Sex fluidity at this point where technology is developed is probably less likely and less likely to be deemed valid in any sense. So I guess that's all I'm saying. So I don't know. Now I one of my friends we've talked about this in the past is a little bit more conservative on this issue. So as to pronoun usages, right? So as to pronoun mandates, he's against those, as I would probably be against those as well, right? As a matter of principle in protecting, freedom of speech and all of that, and I don't think it becomes a slippery slope per se. I don't think that um, it necessarily becomes a form of hate speech to not use a preferred pronoun. After all, you can't say, okay, so here's the thing, right? Um, Pronoun mandates are tricky because, yes, you can force someone if the person, right? What does the text of the law say, right? So, yeah, you have to use this person's preferred pronouns. Does that allow me to choose not to use any pronouns at all? So, does the law mandate me to necessarily and specifically use their pronouns, or can I simply choose to avoid the dilemma by just choosing not to use pronouns at all, right? Or use a more pronoun neutral format. I really don't want to get too deep into that per se, but regardless, I think the fact that we have control over we can generate a certain level of hormonal fluidity, um, implies gender fluidity. But there is a difference between gender being fluid and sex being fluid. I think it's and that distinction between sex and gender is very important. And sex may be fixed, but gender could be fluid. Um, and that's really all I'm saying. It's an important distinction to make when thinking about the issue. Now, pronoun mandates are a separate thing. I don't want to get too deep into the mechanics of all the only point that I was making about pronoun mandates. You must use their preferred pronouns, right? Does that allow me to simply choose to use no pronouns at all? Is the question. Looking at the text of the law. Um, Certainly, it's saying what is meant by you have to use their preferred pronouns is you cannot use their non-preferred pronouns because that is equated to a kind of hate speech. Um, you probably do have the option to use no pronouns at all, and ideally, the law would coerce people to use preferred pronouns in the normal sense of the meaning. But the mechanics of the textual dynamics and of the law is an important thing to consider as well. Um, Regardless, I think it's inarguable that there is this distinction between gender and sex fluidity. Obviously, with testosterone blockers and other estrogenic compounds, we can render gender fluid, but we probably wouldn't be able to change sex, which is static, if we're only considering the chromosomes. So, um, that's really the only point that I wanted to make on the distinction between those two things and how I think about it. But regardless, it is a scientific fact that gender is fluid because if I take a testosterone blocker, it is inarguable that my phenotype will change in ways that render my gender, um, which is perhaps socially rather than biologically constructed, fluid. So that's really the only point that um, I wanted to narrow in on in this live stream, and I'll probably be going live in the next couple of minutes to discuss another issue that I wanted to talk about today. Thank you.